Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another edition of Hold My Drink, where we navigate the news and politics with a chaser of civility. I'm your host, Jen, inviting you to grab your favorite beverage, sit back, and imagine with us how to create a new American identity together. Welcome to this week's Hold My Drink podcast. I have Shane Ahalt Sr. He is an author, just published his book called Out of the Red and Into the Black, a crime novel. He is a former Navy aviator, father, husband, all the good stuff in this world. And so excited to have you on here, Shane. Before we start, I always ask if we're having something to drink for this conversation.
Well, it's good to be here. I am having something to drink, but my drink's kind of boring. Well, actually not. It's a virgin Irish coffee. How about that?
Ooh, I like that. I like that.
So,
Yeah.
so that's my go-to drink for a while was a virgin rum and coke.
Okay.
That's what I used to drink. So now I'm drinking a virgin Irish coffee.
So is a virgin rum and coke just Coke?
Just Coke. Just Coke. Yeah.
I had a friend one time tell me he was drinking a virgin screwdriver, and I'm like,
So
orange
some
juice.
orange juice.
Yeah.
Orange juice.
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm needing to pick me up later in the afternoon. It's coffee, but I did put a splash of whiskey in there, which is what I like to do to my coffee. So there, mine is not a virgin, but it's not very heavy. So because we've got a lot of things to talk about.
Okay.
So the first question for you, Shane, you just came out. You're a new author. You came out with this book, Out of the Red and Into the Black. And I just want first question is, who is Shane? And then the second question, and you can kind of like pull this all into your one answer. How did you? This book is crazy. We've got some stuff to talk about. But how did you become? How did you go from? First of all, just tell me about your life, but then naval aviator to author to school teacher. I mean, you've got a story here that I want to hear.
Well, yeah, I guess. Who am I? Wow, I've never really thought about that question to answer it. Really, I mean, I qualify with who I am by saying I'm a father and a husband. That's the most important thing of who I am to me. That's my life, my job, and then the other stuff is kind of to support that. But how did I go from? So when I was 12 years old, I knew I wanted to be a pilot. I was in Air Force ROTC, and Colonel McNulty was his name. He was talking about flying inverted in the Grand Canyon in a jet airplane. And I said, wait, hold on, wait. You can do this? I want to do that. So my dream was to become a pilot from that moment on, really. Didn't become a jet pilot, became a helicopter pilot. Wasn't in the Air Force, it was in the Navy. But I loved every minute of flying. It was an incredible job, great adventure. And I would probably still be doing it today if circumstances didn't call for otherwise. Some kind of family stuff, I was at the point in my career where I had to go on another deployment for about 3 years or get stationed overseas. And without my wife and my kids at the time were 14 and 16. And I believe teenage boys need dad at home. So like I said, I'm a father first, a husband second, and everything else kind of comes into that. So I had to go ahead and give up that career so I could be there for my kids. So that's where I did that. And then the plan was to move down to Pensacola, Florida, where my wife was from, to kind of support. She supported me for 19 years of my career to say, where do you want to go? So I wanted to bring her back home. And I was the cradle of naval aviation. I'll get a job down there. And I was supposed to interview for this really nice job. And then the hiring freeze started back in 2013. So my plan was to do the civilian government military support thing for about 5 years to get some money situation right. And then become a school teacher, because when I was a pilot, I was an instructor at one point in time. I was pretty good at it. So I said, let me go do that and give back to the community, be a school teacher. So when that hiring freeze thing started, and I really couldn't get a job with the government, teaching was there. So I jumped in Became a math teacher. I did that for about 6 years. And then last summer, opportunity opened up for me to become an ROTC instructor, a Naval Aviation ROTC instructor, or they call it the Senior Naval Science instructor at a school, which was a welcome change. So I took that. The author thing came about accidentally. I never planned on being an author. I never planned on writing a book, but I've written two. The first one I didn't publish. It needs a lot of work. The first one wasn't an original idea. It was a modern take on an old story that's been told too many times of the Seven Samurai, which was the Magnificent Seven, and I was kind of updating that. And then this thing kind of came from, it was really an accident. I went to go see a movie with my son, and I've always prided myself on figuring movies out during the movie. I'm like, this mystery, whatever, this horror movie, where this is coming from. I was watching the movie and I was like, I got this figured out. I know what's going on here. And then when I got to the end of the movie, I didn't figure it out, but I was like, man, my idea is a lot better than this. And Out of the Red Into the Black was born from that.
Okay, but so we can't give away too much of this because we want people to read it, right?
We can give some of it away, I guess.
We well, I'll let you give away whatever you but it is how did you come and in this answer give away what you want to give away
Okay.
of the book? How did you even come up with this idea? I feel like as writers, and I know you said you didn't intend to write, but as someone who writes as well, I mean, a lot of times we're speaking from some of it is fantasy in our head, but we put ourselves into our writing, and
Oh,
so
there's a lot of shade in that book.
well, that my second question. First, I need to hear how you came up with the idea, but I wanted to
Okay.
know who you see yourself in that book.
Okay. So the idea, and I mean, it kind of reveals itself in the second chapter. So I don't think I'm giving a whole lot of the second
Okay.
chapter. I'm not giving a whole lot away of the passing down of the tradition from family to family came from me. Like I said, watching a movie where this guy it was a spirit that was possessing people over time. But I thought it was kind of this thing where somebody kidnapped a child and made them a killer, and then that child became a killer, and so forth. That's what I thought it was. But I was like, man, my idea is so much better. But I don't like, killing for the sake of killing.
Yeah.
I think that's not entertaining. That's just gore and guts and all that kind of stuff. But what if there's a good reason behind it? And that's kind of where this came from. So if I'm killing for a good reason, which am I? Is that justified? When you read this book, is the first chapter justified and what happens throughout? That's kind of where that whole thing came from.
Of all the crimes, and again, we won't give that away. I would
Yeah.
say that might be the most justifiable. It's kind of like have you ever watched the show Dexter?
Yes, it's very Dexterish.
It's very
That's what
Dexterish.
a lot of people compare it to that. It's very
Uh-huh.
Dexterish in that way. Some people look at the show Supernatural and kind of
Oh, I love
feel
that show.
they kind of put that in there as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've written a book and I've always envisioned it of being a movie because I'm more of a viewer than a reader.
Mhm.
So I view movies more than I read books. And that's probably a bad thing to admit as an author, but
As
it's
an author,
kind of
yeah, right?
it's kind of where I am. So I mean, if you read the book, everybody says I see this as a movie. And
Yeah.
people, when they read the book, have told me there's a lot of feedback I've gotten. I can see this movie. I can see this book. Because
Mhm.
they say it's very visual and descriptive, so
Mhm.
they can see everything that happens. And I forgot where I was going with this, but yeah. So
Well, we're just talking about like how you got the idea in the first place.
yeah,
To you were telling me about the movie that you saw, and whether or not you know um, crime you could find a crime that was actually worth
right,
committing. So
right.
now go
And
to
this
my
one is,
well,
yeah,
and I think this I would agree with you. I think this is if there is one crime that's
Yeah, we can
justifiable.
again, we can talk about this too because that comes
Yeah.
out real early in the book. But there are twists and turns that go throughout.
Yeah, but it's the final
Our book.
chapter
Yeah,
that
the
is,
final chapter. Yeah, that
yeah,
too.
and we can't
But
let
yeah,
that go. But
we're not going to give that away at all.
no,
No.
yeah. Tell me though, as well, actually, no, before you tell me who you saw yourself in that book,
Okay.
you just said that you prefer to watch than to read. And yet you just wrote a book. I mean, so I'm guessing from what you're telling me, like writing wasn't something that you kind of felt drawn to throughout your life. It wasn't like you'd sit
No.
down, but all of a sudden something possessed you
Yeah,
where you're like,
really. And here's the thing: is I wrote this book, the heart of it, in 3 months.
that's crazy.
It wasn't. I mean, it wasn't long. I wrote it in 3 months. I wrote it when I retired from the Navy. I
Yeah.
went to start teaching school. That was end of February, beginning of March. School let out in May. I started writing that book June. I was done by the time school started. So I wrote it over that summer. And it was, I mean, the meat of it was there. The story was there. And then I put it up and took it down over and over again for about 6 years. Excuse me, revising it, adding a little bit of stuff here, some meat there, some other stories here, um, proofing it myself, going back and fixing some things. But the heart of the book, the whole story was written in the first in 3 months.
You shouldn't
And it
admit that because a lot of writers are just going to like hate you right now.
well well book two isn't didn't flow like that. People called for a sequel. I've started it and it hasn't it didn't flow like that. It's not flowing like that. I have about 100 pages written of it, but I got sidetracked. There's a whole lot of stuff going on. I got sidetracked from it, so I haven't been able to finish that one. But I haven't been able to dedicate a full summer to it either. So I guess that's probably part of the problem as well. But that book, like I said, I think it flowed through me more than it came out of me.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Yeah.
Well, explain that. I mean, I think it makes sense, but explain it.
It felt like it almost came from somewhere else.
Really.
Yeah. Like the last chapter, I didn't plan on the last chapter.
Really?
It surprised me.
Oh, wow.
As I was typing the chapter, I'm like, oh wait, this is the ending of this book. This is the ending of this chapter. This is the ending of this chapter, which is the ending of the book.
Right.
And it didn't come to me until the middle, me typing the middle of the chapter.
They say
I,
JK, well, JK Rowling apparently dreamt Harry Potter
right.
and then started to write about it. Did you feel like was it a dream? I know you said you saw a movie and you're like, my idea is better, but did you, I mean, how did it flow through you? I mean, did it
It
just,
just, I don't know. Like that first scene came out of pent up hostility towards these people.
mm-hmm.
And we'll get into it now. Child sexual abuse is the worst form of people. Abusers are the worst form of people on earth. And that came from my last job in the Navy. My last job in the Navy, I was the head of enlisted separations. So as a helicopter pilot, my flying career was over. I was a commander in the Navy. That's when they kind of put you out to pasture and they send you to a desk job, and I'm at a desk job. And my desk job was overseeing all of the enlisted separation programs in the Navy, including Don't Ask, Don't Tell when it existed. I was here for the transition to making Don't Ask, Don't Tell go away. But one of my side jobs was monitored through a thing called the Family Advocacy Center. I had to monitor and read about every child sexual abuse case that was reported in the Navy and follow that case from the beginning to the end.
mm,
So, and every one of those I read made my skin crawl. I'd have
yeah,
to close my office door when I read them because a lot of times I'd end up crying about what I was reading. And it would anger me. And I kept saying there's a 38-cent solution to these problems. That was, it's about the cost of 38 around
mm-hmm,
the
mm-hmm,
38-cent
mm-hmm,
solution to these problems. And so to me, that's the lowest form of humanity.
yeah,
And so and anything that happens to them is kind of justifiable in my part, even this stuff that goes
yeah,
on in this book.
yeah.
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 Yeah,
All right, so so that leads to my next question of who do you see? So I kept on from our earlier conversations as I'm reading it, and you and I've had, a few conversations. I kept on trying to see who you were in this because
yeah,
we all write. I mean, and maybe you were several people in there, right? But I think our personalities
yeah.
come out in some of our heroes and even villains in our books. So who do you think that you most related to in that book and why?
There are pieces of me, I think, really in Brian and Coach H. More Coach H than anything.
I thought Coach H as well. I also saw you in uh one of the cops. The name is blanking on me right now. Um,
Oh,
the cop
Chris Caldwell,
Caldwell, Chris
Chief
Caldwell.
Caldwell, yeah, Chief Caldwell, yeah.
I saw you.
Um,
I couldn't decide. It was between Caldwell and Coach H.
no, there's not a whole lot of me in Chief. Yeah, like some of the moralities and all that kind of stuff. I mean, the characters are my characters. They come from what I feel really, and so
Yeah,
there's a lot of me in all of them. But I think really, Coach H is really more me than anybody because it kind of like you talk about the thing that there's a partner he talks about, running with the football team and used to run with the running backs, and now he's running with the linemen, and I feel that. I mean, that's
yeah.
true. I mean, 53 years old. When I first started teaching, I was 46, and I had lost a step or two at 46. Now I'm 53. And I've lost another step. I went out and was racing kids a month ago, and they're all blowing me away. And I'm like, this is not right. This is not right. And there's a Coach H partner. He talks about that as well. So, I mean, that's really where it comes from. Yeah. A lot of him and me. And yeah.
And
So,
the coach too. I can now talking to you since we started talking today as a father figure. He plays more into the place as a father figure than
right.
Chief Caldwell. So I can see, yeah. But it's funny because as soon as I started to read Coach H, I'm like, I wonder, you know, if Shane sees him. I don't know. We always play
Yeah.
our roles into our writing,
Right.
our own
Right.
experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So tell me then, for me personally, I talk a lot about I speak power to racial issues and all kinds of diversity issues. What do you see
Right.
in your writing? There is some issues of racism in your writing.
Hmm.
What's your own experience with that, and how did that play into your writing? If it played into it at all?
Oh, a lot. You know, being a person that's biracial, my mother's African American, my father's Caucasian, so you know, and then I'm married to a black woman, and I have two black sons in today's society, and I live in the South. So yeah, there's some racial components going on that influenced my writing, that have influenced in that, and influenced everything that I do, throughout. Um, you know, and there's some hiccups in the book that have to do with some racism and stuff like that. So I've kind of brought that my feelings about a lot of those individuals in there as well.
Mhm.
So that kind of stuff gets pulled in. Like I said, you know, the book wrote itself, but a lot of me is in that book. A lot of my
Yeah.
experiences are in that book, and a lot of different things that go on are in that book, And I talk about the first book that I wrote that I haven't published yet, that I kind of really needed to do a big rewrite. There's a lot of it in that because that's
Mhm.
what I was going through at the time that I wrote that book. A lot of issues were going through that my kids were going through at the time are in that book, being the two of four black kids in a private school they were going to at the time um, was more difficult on them than I thought it was going to be, and then it had to be. And some of
Mhm.
the stuff that they dealt with in that school was in that other book, and some of it is in kind of important to this as well.
I have to say, that's where I kind of picked up just knowing that we were going to have this conversation. And, I would not have read race into your book necessarily at all, except for I did like one part. And this is why I kind of brought up Chief Caldwell, was because his big thing was as a black chief,
Right,
there was a question of whether or not he should be a cop because, he's seen, racism, but he was like, I'm going to do it because like he's called to do it
right,
and to do it differently, right?
right,
And I really I appreciated that, and I want to ask you, as someone who has been in the Navy, so someone who has been in a position of authority, and now ROTC coach, and obviously add author to that. I mean,
Yeah.
um, I where I get disappointed in our conversations on race sometimes today is a lot of times when people start, particularly, I would say, white Americans. I
Right.
really, I hate the separation. But I think that a lot of times when they, the white allies and whatnot, when they talk about race, there's this almost infantilizing of Black Americans, where it's assumed that if you're Black, you're poor. If you're Black, you didn't
Right.
grow up with a good education. And I see so many people, yourself included, who have just bucked those trends, bucked those stereotypes. Um, I'm always interested in the stories of like uplift and resiliency. And I feel like I'm talking to someone who exudes uplift and resiliency right now, I
Well,
mean, like,
it was never an option not to be. I
yeah.
was raised with two parents in the household. I knew my father. I love my father. He's still alive today. Matter of fact, I need to call him today. I haven't spoken to him like in about a week, so well overdue for that phone call. Um, and they kept telling me, "You are going to go to college. You're going to go to college, son." Neither one of my parents went to college. In fact, I was the first person, really, on both sides of my family to graduate college. Many of them tried. Many of them went. I was the first one to graduate college.
Mhm.
With all my aunts and uncles and cousins and all that kind of stuff. Some have gone after me, but I was the first one to do it. But it was not an option for me not to. That was drilled into my head over and over and over again. The funny thing is, though, when I graduated high school and said, "Hey, I have a 3.5 GPA. I'm the president of the National Honor Society, vice president of my class. I graduated number 3 in my class, which I should have been number 1. But that's a whole other story. And I'm still bitter about this because when
Well,
I'm
you're
taking calculus and you're taking general math, Mike raised
oh, I've got that story too. Go on though.
raised what I rated back in the day.
Yeah, yep, yep.
So um, anyway, so when I graduated, and I went to my parents and said, "I'm ready to go to college." They're like, "All right, well, we ain't got no money. Get a scholarship or do something." So I was kind of left on my own to figure out how I was going to do that. And the Navy at the time gave me what's called a 3-year guarantee. All I had to do is go to University of Maryland for 1 year,
Mhm.
maintain a 3.0 GPA, and they would have given me 3-year scholarship. And my parents didn't have the money to send me there for 1 year. So I didn't take it. I ended up enlisting in the Navy and reapplied for a scholarship a couple years later and got a scholarship a couple years later. And that's, went to George Washington University. Took me 4.5 years to graduate because I was an engineering student, and
Mhm.
engineering curriculum and the ROTC requirements don't really marry up.
Yeah.
So I had to take an extra semester, graduated from there, and got my commission, and the rest is kind of history.
Mhm.
Um, but it was never an option for me not to go to college. It was never an option for me to fail. My
Mhm.
parents weren't going to allow it. You know,
Mhm.
and then my brother, who's 6 years my junior, they're like, "Yeah, you need to figure out what trade you want to be," which I think is kind of wrong. Um, it's not that he wasn't smart; he just wasn't book smart and wasn't motivated to
Mhm.
do well in school.
Mhm.
But and unfortunately, he was taken from us way too young. Um,
Sorry.
but at the time, he was working 3 jobs. He wasn't a bum. The
Right.
dude was going to work. He's working
Right.
his butt off. In fact, the last time I saw him, he's like, "Hey man, I need you to come down to Florida and visit me." He said, "All right, well, what I can do is I can work all 3 of my jobs for 2 weeks. That way I can take off all my jobs for 1 week." I was like, "Okay, man, however that math works out, cool. But I want to see you." So again, he was not going to. Him not being successful wasn't an option. His route was just going to be different. He was going to have to
Right.
work harder. Work harder. I think.
Right.
You know. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, those stereotypes bug the mess out of me too, because a lot of people I know are college educated. And here's the funny thing is, my son pointed this out to me. He's 23 years old. He said, "Dad," he's like, "Well," I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Look at stereotypes. Ours are reversed." I said, "What do you mean?" My wife's father,
Mhm.
the African American, he got a college degree in the 60s. My father, he was Caucasian. grew up in a boys' home, single mom, trying to live paycheck to paycheck, all that kind of stuff was dirt poor, and everybody talks about stereotypes being this. That was completely reversed.
Hmm.
The script was flipped, so to speak. So our family is kind of really the one. If people want to say this is what a black family is, well, look over here.
Yeah.
It's kind of not exactly what, like you said, the stereotypes everybody sees.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I find, damaging about kind of our public narrative right now is that assumption that there's this failure in Black society, and I see the exact opposite. I see this amazing, particularly throughout history. I'm working right now with a co-author of mine, not on a book. We're doing an alternative 1619 reading guide. And one of the
Right.
things that we thought that the 1619 project failed in, which I'm not sure if you've read it, but
I haven't, and
okay.
that's probably bad on me being a teacher, but I've been a math teacher, so
Right,
I've been so focused on making sure you know algebra,
right.
uh, that I really haven't had a chance to really look at
Well, you're excused. I mean, but
that
I
yet.
think it's fascinating because I actually am really so glad that it came out because it does talk about how we're not talking about Black history, and that
Right.
much I am so in agreement with. The problem,
We don't, and we just talk about, Black history goes back before slavery.
oh yeah, well, yeah. There's that
Right,
too. There's
but America, it's slavery. It's Harriet Tubman, Martin Luther King, Barack Obama. That's it. That's Black history.
yes, and
But
so
it's not Mansa Musa. What's oh man, I can't think of his name. He built Timbuktu. Um, I have to think. Musa is his last name. I can't think of his first name. But that's 1400s. The richest man ever to live the world, walked the
mm,
face of the
hmm,
planet. He
hmm,
was equivalent to $40 billion at the time. Where he went on a journey and gave up so much gold to the city that he was in. He caused a recession,
hmm.
in the area because he was so rich and wealthy. But we don't talk about that.
No,
You know, we
no.
don't go back and look at you know um, Kush, the
Hmm,
pyramids of Kush that predate the Egyptian pyramids, and all
hmm.
that. We don't talk about Black history like that.
No,
And stuff that's going on in Ethiopia, and how Ethiopia as a country has never been conquered by outside lands,
yeah, yeah,
regardless of what has happened in there. You
yeah.
know, so
I agree. I agree. But and I guess this is my problem is that while I appreciate the conversation, what I feel like again that the 1619 project seems to speak or pretends to speak with uh a single Black American voice, which I think is just wrong.
well, there isn't one,
There
right?
isn't one. I
Right.
think that in itself is almost, I mean, like I wouldn't assume just yeah, that's ridiculous. But B, it also speaks from a voice, and that one American voice is one of oppression and grievance. And so what I've been doing is like showing like, I mean, to me as a white person looking from the outside in, and I see what the hardship, and I've read the books on slavery, the hard ones, not the
Right.
not the ones that, that are, 10 pages long and tell you, I mean, the hard ones.
Right.
Um, and I mean, horribly brutal. But yet there was so much like the fact that the overcoming and the up, so all those things are things that I think we need to know. But
Right.
I'm also what fascinates me is the overcoming, is the uplift, is the resilience, and that it didn't talk about that too. And I felt like those
Right. And
things need to be put together.
right. That is a major part of Black society and culture, is that despite everything,
Right.
Black people are still here and
And
thriving,
and thriving.
and influencing. And I mean, pop culture is Black culture.
And
So
writing
your pop
crime
culture,
novels.
right? Right, I know. You know, music is so influenced by Black people across the board. I mean, everything, sports, every
Yeah.
sport. I mean, there's Black hockey players. You know, so it's like everything across the board, and everybody wants to go and point to welfare, the crime, or God forbid, when Black people are killed by cops and all that kind of stuff, and all. Yeah, that's all part of it. but even with all of that, you know,
Mhm.
one of the things that I find great comfort in, it's just so funny, and my wife and I talk about this all the time, is Black Twitter.
Okay, tell me about it.
It is hilarious. The comments that, even though this thing happened or this horrible thing happens, that Black people can find humor even in that. And it's, I can't think of examples today. I haven't looked at
Mhm.
it today, but I'm sure if you go on there right now, I haven't been on Twitter in a minute, but if you go on Twitter right now and look, in Black Twitter stuff, there's going to be some comments about the stuff that just happened in Minnesota.
Yeah.
About you, what, you can't tell the difference between a taser and a gun. I mean, come
Oh,
on,
well, white people
you
are
know,
laughing about that too, I'll tell you.
but I mean, it's unfortunately nothing to laugh about. A man was killed over it, but the humor that Black people find in these instances is amazing to me. That you can find humor in that.
Humor
You know,
the thing is I hope that we can find humor eventually
yeah.
together because it seems like because I think humor is healing. Humor is a balm. But
Oh, absolutely. I'll tell you a quick story. Case
yeah.
in point was, and this is really funny, and I hope that I don't think she'll ever see this, but um, we'll see. So when my brother was killed, he was killed in a case of mistaken identity. Somebody shot him, and a week later, we went up at the mortuary trying to pick out. He's cremated, trying to pick out his urn, and it was me and my mother, her sister, and then my aunt, who was my dad's brother's wife. She was there, and she was the lone Caucasian in the room. And so we're all sitting there, and they're bringing out all these urns and this box and this ornament, all these different urns. I'm like, none of these are my brother, you know. And I can't remember who it was. I think it was me. I said, "Can we just put them in a 40 ounce?" You know. And it was just like in that moment, my mother, I mean, she had been crying her eyes out. It's the worst thing that I think any person can go through is the loss of a child. Any parent go through is loss of her child. In that moment, she laughed so hard, you know, and I started laughing because I was finally able to see the relief in her eyes. So I was able to start laughing. And of course, her sister started laughing. My wife started laughing. And across of it all, my aunt is sitting there and she looked so annoyed and appalled that we would be laughing in a situation like this, you know. And it was just that kind of it accentuates kind of the point. It's like even in this tragedy, we're going to find humor. We're going
Mhm.
to find humor in it, you know. And it might not happen on the other side of my family, so to speak, that we may not find the humor here, you know. But that's one of the things I've been really impressed with and learned to embrace and see more of the older I get, you know, as like I said, I'm a biracial individual. You break out the whole chart and everything. I'm more Caucasian than I am black, but society kind of says, that drop of black blood kind of thing, that I could really identify more as African American. Um, but yeah, that's just one of the things that our culture is really great to embrace and see is that humor aspect and resiliency. You know,
Yeah. But I
that
see
comes from that.
I think I'm afraid, Shane, that we've lost some at least together as a group. Maybe, we've got humor in black communities and humor in white communities, but across the communities, we used to be able to poke fun of each other. We used to be able to poke
Yeah,
fun at
yeah,
stereotypes,
yeah,
and now
yeah.
it's like we're so afraid if I say the wrong thing. Did you think it was funny? Did I make a mistake? And someone might not think it was funny because I think we've gotten into a sense of um we're all looking for offense and we're all so easily outraged. So my fear is I think that you're absolutely I think humor is a way to get past it, but everyone's afraid to use humor
Oh yeah, it is. Except for Dave Chappelle.
except for oh my god. I mean, we need more Dave Chappelle's, but
Oh man, Dave Chappelle for president. Let's do it.
if Dave Chappelle wasn't Dave Chappelle, if it was you or me saying those things,
Right.
well,
Yeah,
it was particularly if it was
but the thing
me.
is, he's a brilliant man.
He
And he
is.
knows his history. He'll sit there and explain to you the history.
Mhm.
He'll tell you a story, a historical story, and have you laughing about the historical story in the end.
Mhm.
And you can't be mad at him because what he just told you is everything is fact. So it's not a stereotypical thing. He doesn't do a stereo. So he comes back and he does it. And the thing is, and my youngest son is an aspiring comedian. At least he was at one point. And I know I really have to talk to him and see if he's going to pick up that mantle again. He kind of put it down just before the pandemic. Um, but it was one of the things. It's like, hey, if I haven't offended you, hold on. You know, I'm not done with my routine yet.
Give me a
Or
second.
if you think I'm picking on you, just wait. I'm gonna get the guy next to you. So I'm equally offensive to everybody.
Right.
And I think we need more of that.
Oh,
We need more of that. And there's got to be some sort of license and creativity that we can make those jokes
yeah.
and we can say those things.
Yeah.
You know, but I think as long as you're not dwelling on one individual continually or one segment of society continually poking fun at or making fun of, if we can all laugh together at ourselves,
Mhm.
you know, and others, then yeah, I
Right.
think it's
Right.
okay.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we need to be able to laugh at ourselves
Hmm.
to be able to laugh at each other, and we take things so seriously. But yeah. Well, I'm almost done with my coffee. It has been such a pleasure. Tell me, what is the next, before I let you go, what is your next book going to be
My
about? What do
next
you,
adventure,
yeah,
my next thing. Um, well, with the book, I've gotten an audio book now that just came out April 1st, so I'm real kind of excited about that. So we'll see what happens with that. Um, my hope, my dream is if anybody's out there watching that's a movie producer,
yep,
hit me
yep,
up.
yep,
That's where I would love to go with this. Some sort of get a visual, some sort of visual media, whether it's a movie,
yeah,
a TV series, some because it lends itself to being a series. I mean, really look
yeah,
at that's what my son said. Like the supernatural, they do this all the time. They're doing the
yes.
demon thing all the time. You can kind of flip this and
Mm-hmm.
do this every,
Mm-hmm.
every. It's like so that
I love
then the sequel.
Supernatural, by the way. Tell your
Yeah,
son. I
yeah,
mean, I love
yeah,
Supernatural. My son
yeah.
and I
So
watch it together.
I think he and his brother watched like they're 23 and 21 now. I don't think they started watching like 5 years ago, but I think that show's been on for like 15
Oh
years.
my gosh,
So
totally.
they like, excuse me. So I think they Netflixed a bunch of them to get all caught up.
Hmm.
I don't know if he's watching the past couple of years or not. I don't even know if it's still on or not.
It is.
But it is. Oh, it is.
Yes,
Yeah,
they just
yeah,
finished like the last season. I think like
yeah.
pre-pandemic, but like just
Okay,
before the pandemic. Yeah,
okay, yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if he still watches now, but they watched a lot of it together. Um, but yeah, I can see that happening. And then the sequel, and then I don't know. I might build a car. Uh,
Because
you
why
laugh
not?
because why not?
I mean,
Yeah, I have so many interests. It's just that's one of the things too is with me is like who is Shane Ahalt? Who is he today? Who is
yeah.
it? Who am I today? My degree's in mechanical engineering. I've never used. I went to school, majored in mechanical engineering because I got a 750 verbal on the SATs and a 750 math on the SATs and a
Hmm.
410 verbal. So I can almost do calculus in my head, but I can't spell it. So yeah, but I went to college. The only reason I went to college is to get a commission so I could become a pilot. So the easiest way for me to do that, the easiest way for me to do that is become an engineer.
Hmm.
Which yeah, okay. So,
Yeah.
but I've never used my engineering skills. So I've never designed anything. I've never built anything, and I am a velocity channel addict. My wife comes in and goes, "What are they doing? They're bending tubes and welding stuff together again." They get it. Yeah, that's what they're doing. And it's like, don't be surprised when you see a welder and some tubes bent out in the garage because that's what I may end up doing next. I don't know. So,
Well, I hope
whatever
this
time.
book comes into a movie because that would be so much. I think there's so much drama. So if you
Right.
could have your book into a movie, do you know who you'd want to direct it or who you'd want to star in it?
Um,
Have you thought about that?
well, I mean, come on. Who doesn't want Denzel in their movie,
Yeah, of course.
right?
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
But
Oh,
I also thought like Tate Diggs would be a good Chief Caldwell. Do that.
yeah.
Let's make that happen.
Let's make that happen.
Let's make that happen.
I was thinking if there was a role for me in there, I'm like, nope, nope, nope.
You could be one of the. You could be one of the FBI.
Oh, I could be an FBI agent.
You could
I
be
don't want to
Agent
be
Rigby. You could be Agent Rigby.
okay. I don't want
Right?
to be one of the Creases or anyone who like gets
No,
like, yeah,
no,
who
no.
are bad
Oh, here's
people.
the fun. Yeah, the funny thing about this is there aren't many made up names in that book.
Mm-hmm.
They're all really combinations of names.
Uh-huh.
Like Horton is my mother's maiden name,
Okay.
so that just flew in there. And uh, you know, um, Reggie's Reggie. There's
Okay.
really a Reggie
Uh-huh.
in my life. There's like he's like my adoptive kind of godson. He's in there.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Um, Deputy Childress is this kid that I knew in Tennessee. I put him in there. So a lot of stuff, a lot of people in there, but the people that get uh, killed,
Oh, yeah,
murdered,
murdered,
stuff.
killed. What?
We'll say murdered, chopped
No.
up, are people that have one way or another their names, either first or last names, treated my children poorly.
Ooh.
Ooh, yeah, there's a
Yeah,
spin for you.
yeah, there's a, yeah.
There's a spin for you. Like in real life,
Uh-huh.
those
Uh-huh.
people with those names treated my children poorly. So it's like, who am I going to kill? Oh, that's my name right there.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, because
That's hilarious.
I'm kind of
There's nothing wrong with that. Like I said,
devious
we
like
all
that.
write ourselves into our stories,
Right.
you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, like you said, even the story of like, child abuse, the fact of you had to deal with that and see that every single day as being
Hmm.
kind of the origin of your crime novel makes complete sense. I mean, there's always something more. I love hearing
Right.
the stories
Right.
of authors because you know that there's something in there. But I
Yeah.
have to tell you, I write so much nonfiction, right? I told you writing on like the 1619 and whatnot. I love, I am not
Oh,
a,
please
I,
share that with me once you're done.
okay, I will.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
I love fiction. Love fiction. And I told you I love Supernatural. I love the show Supernatural. So
Yeah.
I mean I enjoyed your book. I like crime novels. I like Stephen King. I like,
I mean, yeah. Stephen King is it.
yeah,
There's
right.
nobody. There's Stephen King, and then there's everybody else.
Right. I love this. But
I'll tell you. I'll tell you. For me, one of the greatest compliments I had. Okay, and I'm
mm,
sorry, I digress. But
mm,
um, so I was mailing books off because people are like one books, one books, one books, one
mm,
books. So I was mailing books off, and I kept on going to the post office. And this guy working at the post office, one of the postal workers, like, what's this book you keep mailing off? "Oh, that's a book I wrote." And he's like, "You got any more copies?" I was like, "Yeah, I got one." He's like, "Buy one." So I bought it. He bought it. And then a couple weeks later, I went in to go mail some more books. He's like, "Dude," it's like, "Yeah." He goes, "I read your book." He said, "Look, I'm gonna tell you something. I was reading a Stephen King book, and I stopped reading it to read your book, and I'm glad I did."
yeah.
I
There
was
you
like,
go.
"What? What?" Yeah, yeah. So yeah, Stephen
You
King. I mean, Stephen King is it. Is it?
right.
Yeah, for me. Yeah,
But well,
yeah,
it's funny because and I love like Harry Potter. I mean, I just love fantasy and I love that and I love crime and Stephen King.
right,
But I write nonfiction and I read people who write fiction, and I'm jealous because that's just not what I was put on the earth to do. I mean, I just don't
right,
have that creativity. I'm a good writer. I have that. I like to think. I mean, I'm not patting myself on the back.
right. Yeah.
I'm working to be a good writer, but I marvel at people who can write novels because I'm like, those twists and those turns and everything.
I do too. I do too.
Uh,
I'm not at it.
then pat
But
yourself on the back
I
because
mean, like I said,
you succeeded.
I, yeah, my name's on the book, but like I said, it flowed through me. It came from somewhere else. Even the second book, when I started writing it, it came from somewhere else, and then that thing kind of went away for a little bit. So I gotta. My wife's had some health issues, and so I've kind of like been trying to take care of her, make sure
Uh,
that's right. But now that's all on the upswing. Everything's kind of on the up and up, and June is right around the corner, so I may end up actually finishing the sequel this summer. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah,
yeah,
but
everyone gets a pass on 2020.
yeah, yeah, 2020. It's like, could that year happen? Yeah, 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 yeah.
Oh, well, Shane, I'll let you get back to your life and your family. It's been such a pleasure
It has
learning more
been.
about the book and getting to know you, and I hope that we keep this conversation going. Thank you for listening to this episode of Hold My Drink. Like or subscribe to the show and check out the show notes for links to source material and to our website where you can find what each of us is reading every week, different news with different views. If you have a topic that you would like us to explore, drop us a line. And join us next week as we say, Hold My Drink, and the conversation gets real.